All right, welcome everybody to another session. Today we are going to talk about Revit do and don'ts. This is basically a collection of all the experiences I've dealt with Revit, and just basically going to talk about what to do and what not to do, especially in the project environment. Let's see, let's move it up there. Today's topic, the only mistakes in life is the lesson not learned. Albert Einstein. I just put it up there. Okay, so here are the topics I'm going to talk about. Expectation versus reality. Things Autodesk trainer train you to do, but will never work in reality. Bad habits. Sometimes what I find with all the projects I've done is that not everything will go according to plan, and sometimes you get unexpected results. The other thing is that what I've learned doing a lot of this project is that when you do it correctly, you save yourself in the future. I'm just going to talk about like three most important, crucial things that you could actually save time if you do this correctly. Lastly, I'm going to end it with some of the new products that are out there that you may not be aware of, but it's very cool as well. All right, expectation versus reality. What ended up happening in most cases is that whenever there's a deadline, you expect to add more people just to complete a task. That's what happens in pretty much every Revit project. Most often what I find is that this can be very detrimental. Okay, what happens is that a user may not be familiar with the project, and they start asking questions, and sometimes you have multiple people working on it, may not have time to train the person. As well, this is quite common, especially project managers just say, oh, can you work on this project right away? I'll say, okay, sure. But they never tell you when's the deadline. They say, oh, yeah, this is going to be due tomorrow. So most often, you're not going to have enough lead time for a user to immerse himself. As well, sometimes you have to give user about like a couple of days in advance saying, okay, I'm having this project, it's due this date. You have to be upfront. Don't just basically tell them, okay, I want you to be in this project, and then tell them later on that this is due tomorrow. So it's not going to work. I put this chart up because what ended up happening is that a lot of time, a client and project manager expect fast and good and cheap, but overall it's not possible. Okay, you've probably seen this one. It means that if you have good and cheap, it means that it's going to be slow and good. But if you want fast and cheap, it's going to be low quality. So a lot of time what ends up happening is that if you want it fast and cheap, yeah, your deliverable is going to be really, really bad. Now, what I find in the past when a lot of project managers, they usually follow trend rather than what you'd really need. I know that a lot of third-party sellers would usually upsell you with all this flash, the whistles and bells about like how Revit is very good and all this stuff. Most often, I always find them to be exaggerated. So you notice that I put down Hollywood BIM because that's exactly what they're doing. So what you have to do is that if you buy into their strategy, they usually want to charge you more on cost, especially training. So this is something that I always be cautious when a lot of third-party developers or third-party reseller wants to sell you. They always want to sell you the software plus more training. So that's kind of like sometimes doesn't work. The reason why I say it doesn't work is because in the past, when someone gets trained, sometimes they're not going to be using the software for like the next 2 to 3 months. And what end up happening is that when they get the project that they want, and when they work on it, they already forgot all the training. And often or not, we don't need all the software to deliver one particular project. Because often or not, Autodesk will sell you a whole bunch of stuff like, oh, BIM 360, oh, you can use Navis work, you can use 3D Studio Max, etc. Often or not, we don't need those stuff. All we need is just one simple workflow that works with everybody. And I emphasize, always focus on your client deliverable, okay? Most often, your client does not need model up front. All they care about is just give me the PDF. So at the end of the day, when you get all this training, you're just basically pumping in money that is really wasteful. Um, also, you have to figure out how your software integrate with other consultants and clients. This is very important because Autodesk is not going to play nice with everybody. So they always say their solution is always the best. But in our industry, we have to work with Bentley, we have to work with Graphisoft, we have to work with Nemetschek, basically like Vectorworks, ArchiCAD, MicroStations, and etc. So this is something that Autodesk is not going to provide you. You have to kind of establish that kind of what software works for you. And also, I always emphasize simplest solution is always the best. This is very, very common. You don't really need like Navis work. You don't need 3D Studio Max. You don't need like BIM 360. You could just do it just using the simple method like Dropbox or anything that you can find. All right, things never work in reality. Often what Autodesk will do is that they will always train you in something, but it would never work in reality. So I put in this Thomas Edison quote: "I've not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that don't work," which is pretty much true. So one example, I usually find it very detrimental, is this: everybody loves to use ramp and this wall opening. However, what I find in all the projects I've done, ramp is useless. Don't use it. The reason why I said is because you're not able to attach any wall to the underside of the ramp. And if you want to use the slope tag, good luck. You're not able to do it. You have to use a stair tag. Okay, even that is just not working properly. So my alternative for anybody who wants to get into Revit is that just use floor and slope the floor. It works way better, and you can attach a wall to the underside. As well, when you do wall opening, just be careful because you cannot schedule them. When you put in an opening, you want to know what's the width and height. Wall opening will not schedule for you. And often what I find is that if you put that wall opening into a group, it will cause an error and corrupt your whole file. So I would just say stay away. If you want an alternative, you can use a curtain wall with the panel as an empty panel. So it just does the same thing. Plus, curtain wall will always schedule. You can schedule them and tell them what size you want. So that's your alternative. Automated tags and dimensions are hard to maintain. Often what happens, you always get this message, okay, something gets deleted. You don't know what it is. So just be careful. Later on, I'll show you one way to kind of minimize this kind of error. Automated tag and dimension will work with simple project, but once you're working on multiple story project, it just fails miserably. So it's just something to maintain. I know that this is like a major problem in pretty much any office, is that just keep tagging stuff, but most often you'll find stuff that's go missing. Yes. Yes. It's not a problem within a model, but the only issue I have is that when user starts deleting and putting their own wall, that's basically deletes the tag. So just be aware, changes will happen, okay? It's something that we want user to kind of like do it once and do it right, and don't basically just go in there and hope that, oh, you want to redesign this. Because most often I think the tags get deleted when users just go in there and just delete stuff without knowing that that's already been tagged. So something to kind of watch out for. Bad habits. I know this is a common thing in Revit. My previous office, people usually just wait for someone else to solve their issue. Okay. Continued learning is always good. I always emphasize, if let's say I'm busy, somebody else is busy, just watch video or do whatever so that you learn something. And sometimes the most useless information I gave you maybe turn out to be very useful in the future. So just keep in mind, because waiting is sometimes could be detrimental. Okay, just don't wait. Just learn as you go. Other bad habits I always find is that users seldom save to central. Um, every time you did a major change, I always tell people save it. All right, save every 15 minutes if you can. The reason why I constantly want user to save is because this week I ran into one issue. One is in BIM 360, the other one is in the central model. So sometimes this could happen at any time. The connection may not be as stable. So you want to save every 15 minutes just to save your work. If you don't do that, then you are at mercy of internet connections. So just be aware of that. This will happen. It will happen a lot, especially more and more people working remotely. So I always encourage people to save. Okay. Sometimes if you, that's yes, that's correct. And also keep in mind when you're doing save, just wait for another person to finish. Don't quit. Sometimes you just have to wait because the user just have to finish the process, then you can save. Okay, another bad habits I always tell user to never ignore is ignore the warning. In this particular project, there's like 600 plus error. This is a different project. It's not the Bird. Bird's pretty good. The reason why I want user to not ignore the warning is because if you ignore it, the model will slow down, prone to crash, and corrupt the model very easily. So what you have to do is always fix the error before it's becoming a major problem. So if you don't do that, let's assume that you have an identical instance in the same place. What the user should do is that, okay, look at it very carefully, don't ignore it, or you just go into one of the error warning sign and just look at it and see what you can fix. Certain errors you cannot fix, some errors you can fix. So if you run into this kind of an issue, just you can always talk to me. I'll just let you know what error and how to fix it properly. I would just say keep this down to 200, you're good. Okay, the more error, like some projects I've seen up to 2,000 errors, yeah, your model is going to get slower and slower as you go on. So just remember that. All right, bad habits. Revit have this really annoying pop-ups. What it does is that every time when you draw a wall or draw a floor, it would tell you, oh yeah, do you want your wall to attach to the underside? The answer I always give to everybody, it's always say no. The reason why you want to say no is because Revit will be dumb enough to actually attach the wall to every floor. And what end up happening is that you're going to end up having tons of errors popping up. So this is kind of like the error generator. Now for this one, level, let's say when someone rename a level, if you say yes, what end up happening is that your level will rename the same as the elevation. I've seen some people rename them with their name on it. At the elevation, I see their name at that elevation. So just be careful with that when you're trying to rename and stuff. Or else you end up renaming in the elevation marker, and someone will go in there and say, why is this called Ellis, right? So just be aware, always say no to everything. Object placed in the wrong work set. Now, this becomes a bad habit for most people, so I always advise people to put it in the correct work set so you save everybody enough time, okay? Especially when you're working with remote computers. Closing work set does help. When you have like stuff placed in the wrong work set, it becomes harder for them to kind of like concentrate. And sometimes what ends up happening is that user may place the link in the wrong work set, and when they open up that work set, it's going to take them twice as long to open. So just be aware of that. Okay, I think for the Berard, it's pretty streamlined, but I've seen in other places where it's not, and this becomes a big problem if I want to turn certain object off, like work set off, and I still see a lot of objects being placed in work set 1. All right, this is another bad habits, and I've seen people, what they do is that they like to explode CAD and translate it into Revit. You have to be careful because what ended up happening is that when you link in CAD into Revit, what it will do is that it will just create this import line style, and plus if you explode it, it will basically create a bunch of AutoCAD layers in your list. As well, it would just dump you like all this material. Like you always see this material 1, 2, 4, 1, 6, 5, and 0, which means that any AutoCAD layers, Revit will treat them, all of it, as a separate material. Just be aware, this is why I don't link AutoCAD file directly into the main file. I usually create a separate file just for that, so that all of this junk basically populate in the other file and not the main model. All right, sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, right. Yeah, I've learned that before. You can also link in. Let's say if you have images, let's say you have like CAD image, like image that you want to kind of like change and stuff like that. Uh, this method actually works well. I'll probably talk about that in another slide. All right, adding complexity when it is not needed. I know that this is kind of like it really depends on user. Uh, what I did in this two screenshot is that I know that some people likes to put in drainage and all that stuff. What ended up happening in this scenario is that whenever you add in this little detail, it will orient your hatch pattern, and someone has to go in there and manipulate each and every single one. Versus on the left side, oops, sorry, on the left side, what I told the user is just put a drain line in there and don't care about sloping it and make it look like it's a real thing. Okay, just make it like it's like an arbitrarily drainage line like this. So all you're doing is just adding lines, and it makes it a little bit easier than you go in here and manipulate all of this. In some cases, you have to do it because this thing is sloping down right gradually, and then you have to kind of match the, the the elevation, because this thing is actually gradually sloping. In this case, yeah, there's nothing much you can do about it. But in most cases, if it's only like a flat slab, it's a brand new building, I would recommend just put in this drainage fixtures and just draw a line to it. That way you don't have to add a point here and then manipulate and rotate all this hatch. And that's that's a lot of work if you think about that. I always tell users, just know your deliverable. Okay, if the client's not going to worry about like the 3D model, there's no point of adding all those extra work when someone can actually easily just go in there and reset your whole floor slabs. So just be aware of that, because I've seen user just spend so much time trying to make it so right, but the client only cared about the 2D deliverables. Overmodeling. Okay, so this can be a bad thing, especially when you're doing a Revit project. This is a simple project. So what I did is in here is that I just adding in overcomplicated model just to illustrate that yes, you can actually go super detail. And what ended up happening is that your size becomes super huge. And this building itself only have like a couple of families, but it ballooned up to 600 megabyte. So just be aware, don't overmodel. I know it looks cool when you put it into Enscape and just make it run, but most often it just impacts your file size. Other user will just, it's hard to work with. If you have to do it, I would just say put it as a separate model and just put it in as your rendering. And then for the main file, you just don't put in this kind of an object. So what you're doing is that you're creating another file just for rendering purposes. And for this particular central file, all you have is just your walls and your typical layouts, and that's pretty much it. All right, other bad habits. I've seen this quite a bit, especially new user likes to put in an object and it's hosted on a floor. Okay. Two projects this week, I have to kind of fix the problem, because what ended up happening is that someone accidentally deleted the floor. And what ended up happening is that this object gets deleted. So I have to go back in there just to look at what's been hosted, and I have to kind of like host it by level, then copy those objects back to the original project. So just keep in mind, just always check and make sure that those objects are not hosted on a floor, because accident will happen. Someone will accidentally delete the floor, and once that's deleted, all your objects gets deleted. Yeah. Okay. This is another issue as well. I've seen quite a bit. Is that you have a cabinetry and it's hosted to a wall, but that wall is not hosted in the group. So this could become detrimental, because if you copy that group and paste it onto another floor, what ends up happening is that your group becomes disjointed. So my solution for this is that if you have an object that's hosted on, let's say, a wall, what I typically recommend is that you either put that wall within the group. If you cannot do that, I would recommend just draw a thin profile wall, call it a tile, and then just host that cabinet to the tile wall. That way you don't run into this kind of a problem. Okay, so as long as the wall and this family's hosted is in one group, you're fine. If it's in separate group, then you have a problem. So this is something to be careful with. All right, not everything will go according to plan. Most often, I always like to talk about good and bad project experiences to improve future projects. That way, users just have to know what will work, and then after that, implement it in their projects. I always like feedback as well. Like if things doesn't work, I usually just list it and say, okay, what can be improved? Sometimes it's just software issues that Autodesk, Autodesk loves us if we give them feedback. So I usually in contact with Autodesk just to tell them that this is the problem that we're having. Can you fix it? Sometimes they say they'll think about it, and sometimes they say, yeah, it's fixed in the next release. Not everyone is an expert. I'm not an expert in everything. I'm just expert in certain things, but I always learn stuff from other people as well. So if you are like an expert in SketchUp or any other software, I like to learn with you guys, because how Revit integrates with other software really depends on your expertise and not mine, because I don't know anything that's going on inside other software. So if you guys have that expertise, then I would love to kind of like, learn it so that you can improve with that workflow integration. Right. This is kind of like an accident. What ended up happening is that sometimes you will find software that it's not, it's supposed to use for one thing, but it kind of like use it for some other stuff. In the past, Autodesk really wants us to use Navis work for collaboration, just to find piping and all that stuff. The biggest issue I had with that is it has a lot of layers, like a lot of stuff in there that is not very intuitive. For an architect, you get lost. You will get lost really easily. For contractors, they love it because they could do a lot of stuff with it. For us, we are visual people, so what we typically do is that we just want to find something that we can use and integrate it pretty well. So what I find is that you can actually use Enscape, right? Because Enscape is just basically you walk into the space and just use it as kind of like a visual check. And what I did here is that I kind of like put all the mechanical under one color and then structural another color. And when you clash it with architectural, you get this color mash and saying, okay, what's mechanical and what's electrical and what's structural. So it really helped us, especially when we're doing a lot of client walkthrough. It becomes really, really important just to get a discussion with them so that they understand what's going on with their model. Because in excuse me, in Revit, sometimes you can't see what's going on. So having this tool actually does help them. All right, going back to this, sure. Yes. Yes, you can. What I have is a template for that as well. Probably in the future, I'll just discuss how to do that because it can get very complicated if you don't understand how it works. So yeah, I'll probably reserve that slide for like future kind of Q&A kind of a thing, QAQC kind of a thing. But for this purposes, I just want to show, like this is what I would do. But if you want to do it in Revit, yes, there's a certain way you can actually do it. It's much easier inside Revit, but Navis for Enscape, it's a little bit tougher because it relies on material. So the material all has to be the same, then you get this kind of effect. If you don't do that, it becomes really tough because you can't see what's what. All right, let's talk about this cat link as a separate Revit file. So I'm just going to go into one of the projects. Okay. So what I like to do with this is that I like to set up a file for every project. And I'm just going to go level 1. Let's assume that's the level 1. So what I have in here is that I have a CAD already set up. And what it does is that within the CAD, it has a lot of like, okay, I have a surveyor as well. So I go in here, it gives me a survey drawings, and then if I want to switch it to another one, it becomes it becomes a different one. So let's assume that I want let's see, I will want to have an image, and say okay. Oh, there we go. So you notice that this is all linked in. So you can actually put in anything inside your CAD link. Now, what I like to do with this is that all the images, I just dump it into the CAD link so that the file size for this CAD image is actually don't impact this central model. So if you have like any images, like let's say a streetscape, let's say you have a 3D model, you did a rendering with another software, I like to dump it into the CAD link file so that all the images are dumped there. And when you link it in, you can still link in that images as well. So yeah, this becomes a very useful kind of a scenario. So you don't have to do this. Like if you do have an Excel, like you have a Excel file that you want to do your chart and all the figures and all that stuff, I usually just say generate the images and just dump it in that CAD link file. And then what happened is that you just basically superimpose it into this drawing, and then it becomes part of your package. So yeah, it allows you to kind of change to different one. You can actually create one with like, let's say level 1 is only giving you this really mess up CAD. And then for level 1 background, what you do is that you can actually turn off certain layers that you do not want to see and only want to see certain ones. So it does help if you want to like set up different backgrounds. Okay, dimension to details and group it. Okay, so I should demonstrate that in this particular file again. Okay, so what I have here, let's go to level 3. So in this particular file, what I have is that I have a detail. Okay, I have a group. Okay, this is my group. Let's copy this. Okay, let's say I'm going to put it here. Now within this group, you notice that I have this attached detail group. Okay, when I attach it, let's say I want an area tag. You notice that it actually tags with that. So if you have like a group, one group set up already, you can actually group your tags with this. So how you set this up, I'll just going to show you how it's set up. So let's say I'm going to ungroup that. Next thing you want to do is that if you have a tag, let's assume that I'm just going to tag another one right here. What you can do is that you can select all the tag. Oops. I'll select all of that tag and then group it. what it will do is that it will create a group. Yeah, it's going to take a while, but here you go. And you notice that it attaches to this group, model group. So let's assume that this is the test. So every time you want to, let's say, delete this, and now what you can do is that you can attach it. You want to go test or the other type of tags. So if you're doing like a mirror objects, let's assume that your tag is overlapping. You can actually swap it. Let's assume like this is, not this one, sorry, this one. It's always selecting. There you go. You can always say, okay, swap it with this one. And there you go. So it basically creates that extra tag that's added to that. So it's a very useful thing, especially when you're doing a lot of like high-rise or repeated units and stuff like that. I know that in one projects, all you have to do is just create one group, okay? And then what you do is that just select all the tags that's within that group and just group them together. And what happens is that this particular object becomes part of that group. Now this one, it's very interesting because what I like to do with this is that I like to add detail lines. Okay, I like to add detail lines and basically just attach it to that detail lines, the dimensions to the detail lines. The reason why I like to do this is because sometimes people would go in there, modify the units, and sometimes this object moves and you don't know who did it. What I have is that I have a backup plan where the detail lines become kind of like my object where it doesn't get moved. So you can tell QAQC what's been moved and what's not been moved. Since nobody knows that I did this, right? So you can actually kind of check one versus the other. If someone actually moves certain things, then you know it, that someone actually moved it. And then you can always refer back to the original dimension where you put your suite, and you can just move it back accordingly. In a lot of cases, especially in the project environment, it becomes very difficult to see who did what. So the only time you want to have like a safety mechanism is that you have to create this type of a detail line so that if anybody moves something, then you know what's been moved. Now, in this presentation, I always say, this isn't a big error message inside Revit, is that inside the group, I always say disallow join at the wall. The reason why I like to do this is because if someone has ownership of this wall, outside of this group, and you have an ownership of this particular unit, sometimes Revit have no idea who's the owner of what if this thing gets joined with that. So this becomes a big issue, especially Revit. Error message and all that's popping up is because if this wall joined with that wall, this is another user owning that, and you owning this one, yeah, big problem. So this becomes a big error message. So what I tell user to do is that you go into your units, okay, just attach it. All you have to do is just go right click and say disallow join. Right now you allow join, right? All you have to do is just say disallow join and just drag it over to the edge. Okay, it's a good practice. Try a couple times, and then what ends up happening is that you're not gonna see this error anymore. Okay, since the group, this group and that group is independent, so this join will not interfere with the other join. So it makes it a little bit much easier to deal with all this error inside Revit. Great. So in this last one, I know that Revit is ever changing. Like our landscape is ever changing. We experience a different technology that improves our lives. One of the major one I've seen so far is Twinmotion. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you video of it. So how many of you guys heard of Twinmotion? Nobody. Okay, so the best thing about Twinmotion is that you can actually do a lot of, it's similar to Enscape, except it does really good with the weathering. So if you do a lot of weather, water, let's say if you want snowy condition, trees, this is a pretty good software. It's supposed to be competitive to Lumion, but what I find to be the most amazing thing about this is that it's using Unreal Engine, right? And then you can actually add in really, really like nice filters to it, so to give it a glow. It's much more immersive, I would say. It's much more advanced than Enscape. And plus, the user actually, the developer, is actually adding more stuff to this. So right now, I still think Enscape is pretty good in terms of doing what we need. But in the future, what they want to do is that they want to take this and develop it even further. So it's almost like you're doing a gaming. So this is all the details is within the Twinmotion. So you notice that it's very intuitive. ArchiCAD is actually using Twinmotion as kind of like their partnering program. So if you work with ArchiCAD, you can easily transfer it into Twinmotion, and it's a very good kind of like integration. For Revit itself, yeah, it's basically you kind of have to purchase a license, but right now you can actually try it out for free. I think they have 2019 version is kind of free. Yeah, and this is pretty good. I think this is exciting for future. Will we still use Lumion? Absolutely. There's certain things Lumion does better than Twinmotion, especially material. Twinmotion, what it does is that it likes to do triangulation textures. Sometimes when you do like a rough surfaces, especially let's say a floor, what end up happening is that Lumion is able to correct that triangulation versus Twinmotion, you're not able to do that. But I think they probably fixed in 2020, but last time I checked, they weren't able to do that. Right, the next slide I'm going to talk about is, oops, let's go to the next one. Okay, BimX. Anybody heard of BimX? It's an add-on for ArchiCAD. What it does is that it's kind of like, think of it as like a building package, and you package it up to a consultant, and you send it to, let's say, site as a publishing tool. So what it does is I should just basically show it. Yeah, does it have a volume? Oh, you can't hear it. So I'll just play the actual video, because you can't really hear it. So let's see if there's the volume for this. Oh, okay. But anyways, it's a very immersive. So what it does is that it takes like a ArchiCAD file and then publish it as a 3D version. So if you want to do like a sheet, right? Let's say a plan. What it does is that it's able you to kind of see where that plan in relation to your 3D. Okay. I don't think Autodesk has this. Last time I checked, you can actually take Revit model and put it into ArchiCAD and publish BimX through this way. And what it does is that allows you to kind of like get all the sheets and all the levels and everything, and you're able to produce this kind of a documentation and just trying to orient it to the right direction. And the web is this BimX is actually from Graphisoft, so it's basically the maker of ArchiCAD. So what it does is I'm able to take the 3D, like your BIM model, and then basically just publish it as a drawing. And then what ends up happening is that it packages it up so that if you want to look at your drawing based on where your 3D model, it will just basically just do that. It's pretty intuitive, I would say. I don't think we have it for Revit side of things. I know that Autodesk wants us to use the BIM 360, but this one is kind of like a standalone. Okay, so it's able to publish it and kind of do it with away from that. Oh yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, this I've talked to the guys who make this, and they say that yeah, if you want to like have BimX, you kind of have to buy a license of ArchiCAD. But I just say, you know what? If you guys can make this standalone and have it like a way for other Revit users to do it, then we just purchase the license just to get this kind of a feature. Yeah. Hopefully in the future, the developer's kind enough to say, okay, yeah, maybe there is a market for this, because this is a pretty powerful kind of a tool, and allows you to kind of open up a 3D model, and you can actually look at things, access the data, and publish it. I mean, that's the one thing that we all wanted, right? All the drawings with all your 3D models, everything together. Sadly, yes. It's actually similar to how Revit does its own thing. So just publish it as like WebMX kind of like a file. Because Revit, like if you go to BIM 360, you can actually view Revit file from there, like all this data. It's pretty lightweight. So it's has some similar technology to it. So I would just, it's a very lightweight, yeah, exactly. But the other thing I kind of like trying to explore is that whether we could push this to more of a streamline our process where we don't have to rely on BIM 360. We can use some other software to kind of do the same result. Because the BIM 360, what I find is that it's very difficult to client to just open up a file because they have to constantly log in. For this one, you can actually publish it as an exe file, and they can just go in there and just they don't have to log in. They just basically view the file based on what the link that you give them. So it's a pretty self-explanatory. Because what I find with BIM 360 is that you need a license to kind of get in there, and I know that a lot of firms they don't like that because you have to purchase every license you have to do. You have to purchase this, purchase that. It becomes a detrimental. All right. Yeah, this probably ends the presentation unless you guys have any comments of what other stuff you guys learn, like that's going on in the AC world. Because this two software, it's pretty intuitive. I would say BimX. Yeah, I mean, if this is the approach, we may purchase one license. I don't know. I'm just looking at it as kind of like your alternative to BIM 360. However, you kind of have to learn ArchiCAD just to kind of look at like how to create section, like generate it. But I just want to do like one-on-one translations. Is basically take the Revit model with all the views and everything and just publish it on BimX. I wish there's a way, but currently I've talked to the guys that say that no, you can't do it. You just have to create everything inside ArchiCAD, then you can publish it to get that kind of a result. But if you want to do like a straight-on converting Revit model into BimX, that can be achievable if that's what client wants. But if they want to have all this views and everything, then you have to do it inside ArchiCAD. All right. No questions so far? So hopefully that's something to look at. Twinmotion, if you guys want to play around, let's see, Twinmotion. There's a lot of great videos. It's getting a very, very huge support. I know several architects are starting to kind of use it because of the intuitiveness, as well as it has a lot of features in there that you can actually use. Now, one thing you kind of have to know about Motion is that it keeps the file separated from Revit. Unlike the Enscape, basically does direct translation. Motion, it saves its own file, and then if you want to manipulate the texture, you can do it inside the Twinmotion. So it's very similar to Lumion. So yeah, if you guys loves to kind of like look at it, then yeah, there's like website in there. You can just look at it. Architecture. I mean, this is one of the big thing coming up. I think VR they're doing it and trying to integrate it more with the gaming industry as well. So you can see a lot of architecture, gaming kind of becoming kind of like integrated together. But yeah, I mean, they do a lot of this stuff. It's pretty nice. I mean, if you're doing a lot of like the bridge design, Lumion does work, but this one as well, it's a tool that I would say will take over our industry in the next couple of years. So yeah, just look out for it. All right, that concludes the presentation. Hopefully you learned something new today.